when you started P2P, was it a matter of, it was just a matter of interest, right? Because you were coming from your real estate career and you're like, all right, I'm going to start building paddle boards on the side. And, now that you're in an 8,000 square foot space, where exactly did you start? I mean, in your garage?
I started with a partner who was just a kind of niche boutique custom surfboard builder
Right.
here locally, and he knew how to build he knew how to build stand-up paddle boards.
Right.
And when we were designing, P2P originally stood for prone to paddle.
Mm-hmm.
And so uh, not having any board building experience at all, just being in real estate, we had this great idea about storing a paddle on the deck of a board
Right.
to help athletes train for the SUP
Mm-hmm.
races. And so I went to him and said, "Hey, I got this idea. You want to partner up, try and get a patent on this thing?" We'll skip forward a whole couple years later, and we didn't get the patent. Felt crushed
Mm-hmm.
by it, and so my partner kind of bounced. And then I was like, "Well, we got
I got
some
this thing.
semblance of I got this thing I still got to do,
Right.
and I got to figure out how to make something out of it."
Right.
And so that's how I wound up in Hawaii and
Right.
meeting the lifeguards. And they were asking about, hey, you've got some really cool technology and you've done this innovative thinking on stand up boards,
Mm-hmm.
stand up paddle boards. Can you help design rescue boards? And
Right.
I was like, typical answer of an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Sure, I can do that. Not knowing anything damn thing about about it.
Right.
Uh, but then so we wound up in Hawaii,
And how
and then
did you
around
wind
the
up in
country
Hawaii?
talking to people. A guy by the name of Kai Hall is a North Shore lifeguard,
Mm-hmm.
and on social media, he had been bugging me while I was doing prone to paddle, and we were doing the paddle and setting the board. He was like one of those people on social media that just kept bugging you,
Right.
and I just thought he was annoying at the time because I
Stop
wasn't.
tagging me.
Yeah, right, and exactly, and so I didn't pay any attention to what he was asking me and telling me. He kept
Mm-hmm.
saying, you should put a pad on the deck of a board so that we can use it to train for rescuing.
Right.
Well, I kept brushing him off. Get away from me. And then once I finally had nothing, no patent, no business partner,
Right.
no, like, wow, let's entertain this guy.
Yeah.
And I look at my wife. I was like, you want to go to Hawaii?
Sure.
So
Why not?
why not? That's how we wound up in Hawaii. I met Kai, and then I saw the rescue boards they were using were basically the same rescue board in Hawaii as they're using in Florida and that they're using in California.
Right.
And that just didn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, why is everybody using the same design board, and yet everybody's coastline is different?
Right.
Everybody's swell is different. Everybody's victim profile, is different.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
And now we build rescue boards. Yeah.
Awesome. So, but there's got to be this. I mean, you went from selling real estate to building rescue boards. I mean, they're just so different in every which way. So you had, and even the thought that you had about, all right, well, every coastline's different. Every victim is going to be different. That's a very intuitive thought to have. So, my guess is you pretty much grew up on the water. Fishing, boating, paddling. Hit there in North Carolina, right?
Yeah, the link that you're kind of missing there is really the backstory, I guess, to how my mindset went from prone to paddle
Mm-hmm.
to P2P Rescue. And it's interesting. I tell people they know some of my history, and my father died in a drowning accident when I was 16, which was 30 years ago now. No, I'm not that old. How old am I? That's 20 years ago now, which is a wild thing to think about. And
Mm,
so as I got into it, I didn't come into this thing like, oh, my father had this tragic accident and drowning, and I'm going to go help make the drowning prevention world better.
mm-hmm.
I didn't come into it in that mindset, which I think is different in hindsight. I kind of got pulled into it from a different way. So I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't forcing the drowning prevention thing. And I really truthfully didn't see building rescue boards as drowning prevention initially. I honestly, God didn't even connect my father's death with what I'm doing now until like a year
Mm,
later. And I started attending these conferences and everything was about drowning prevention, drowning prevention. I was like, wow, we're actually not building just a surfboard with rescue handles and a pad. I was like, we're actually designing stuff to save lives.
right.
And it was a real moment for me, an emotional moment for me when somebody else, it was a chief actually out of Fort Lauderdale that put it together. She came to me at a conference. She's like, "Don't you realize what you're doing?" And I was like, "Oh no, I didn't." Um, and then everything happens for a reason. I believe that, just like losing my patent, and then having that, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Having that realization, then we started building other types of rescue boards,
Mhm.
and that's when we kept pushing to design now not just rescue boards, but now other equipment that people need, for drowning prevention. And so now I proudly say, that's what we're doing now.
Right.
So there's the link. My father was a real estate developer, and I was following in his footsteps to be a real estate developer, and you know, doing very well. Good God, in '08, before '08, you could make money selling a parking lot,
Right.
you know, in real estate,
Mhm.
and was doing great with it, and could have kept on that path, quite frankly, following in my dad's steps.
Yeah.
And then to leave the real estate market and development into doing this, had a lot of consternation and anxiety, but it was in another way. I guess I was helping fulfill my father's spirit in what he did.
Mhm.
And we're still, we're in our fifth year of the company, and this was going to be our break even year, thanks to COVID.
There's always
It's a
another
fact of life.
challenge, right?
Yeah, yes, there is.
Yeah. So when you first started, like post, having your buddy leave and now you're starting to build rescue boards. When you made that realization of, hey, I'm no longer really building rescue boards, I'm saving lives. What was kind of your transition and mindset of to, okay, well, it's not just about the board, it's about the people, and how did that, do you think, played a role into you creating what P2P Rescue stands for today? Because that's a very large transition to make, and it's pretty profound at the same time. Like, you're no longer just making boards, you're literally saving someone's life. So what did that feel like? And then what was that kind of setting you up for to where you are today?
Zach, I never thought about it in the well, I guess in that timeline of context. I could say that I never really thought of it as it going to be like a full time job.
Right.
Just like as I started the stand up paddle thing as a side business with somebody
Mhm.
else, it was just always going to be an aside thing. And even still, after losing a partner, and even when I was in Hawaii, when we went to Hawaii looking at the rescue boards, I was still doing this as just kind of a thing on the side and
Mhm.
still doing my real estate. So it's interesting you kind of connected it for me that it wasn't until I changed the official name of the company from Prone to Paddle to P2P Rescue that I actually hung up my real estate hat, gave it back to my family,
Mhm.
and said, "Okay, guys, if we're going to make a difference in drowning prevention, and we're going to make this company survive and make a difference in the world by innovating new rescue boards, I got to go full bore."
Right.
So, you know, my wife and I had just gotten married, and we hadn't had kids yet. And I was like, well, hell, if there's ever time to give it a go, let's go.
Yep.
And so I went full bore, man. You had to, you couldn't create, there wasn't the time to create and innovate if you're just not fully committed in your time and in your brain.
Right.
And then, so 4 years later, it's interesting. I just looked at the serial numbers. I think we just built our 350th,
Wow.
345th rescue board
Mhm.
in 4 years.
Congrats. That's a lot of boards.
Yeah,
That's no
it's a
joke.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you were on a TED Talk a while ago. What was that, a couple years ago? I think it was.
I think it was like 2 years ago,
something like
about
that.
this time actually.
Yeah, and when
Yeah.
prior to us having this conversation, you sent it to me, and I actually watched it twice, and very well spoken, by the way, in on a stage and with all those people and pressure, and um, you mentioned this moment which I thought was really cool. And another profound moment where you were out in Hawaii and you were trying to get was the I think the lifeguard's name was Kali, right? You had mentioned
Kai.
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 Um,
Yep.
and Kai was trying to convince you to get off the jet ski and go surfing, right? And it's
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know what I
Yes,
mean? And
yeah, that was yeah, that was that guy's actual name was Bouvet.
Uwe, okay,
He's a yeah, Bouvet. He's old school OG lifeguard at Makaha on Oahu,
okay.
which Makaha is known as the gnarliest, one of the
Oh
gnarliest,
yeah,
biggest surfs.
big time.
You know, big time. You know Makaha. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
so yeah, that was Bouvet at Makaha. That's what that story is you're talking about.
Yeah. So how do you think that story is kind of a good view into starting P2P, right? Because now you went from your buddy, now you had this transition, and now it's like, all right, like you said, it's jumping in with 2 feet and going full bore, hanging up your hat. And it seemed as though this was like a transitional moment for you where it was, all right, here we go. And it was like the first test into we have our first boards. We're trying to show them, what they're really made of and building and constructing them. And now you really you gotta go play with the big boys. And not only that, but in some of the biggest surf in the world.
Yeah, because I hadn't thought about it like that. Um, I will say at that moment, and I didn't mention it in the TED talk. It was also at that moment that I don't think I said in that story when Bouvet they were testing. It was huge, man. It was massive off Makaha. Um, and we were out there for like 2 hours, and they were testing the boards. And I'm looking at things and watching the boards and float and this and that. And uh, it wasn't until the first time I said no, jumping in the water, to the second time when he asked, that I just realized. I was like, oh snap, man. I was like, if they can't expect me to get on my own board in this, how can I expect them to trust me to build their boards,
Right.
right? And that was in itself, as you said, a profound moment when I realized. I was like, man, I'm building stuff not just for somebody that I don't know to go off into the water and make it safe. It's going to actually take on a couple people's lives. So if
Right.
I got to trust if they can't trust me to get on it, then why should they trust the equipment itself?
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, side note, if you're going to go down on a 20-foot wave, it's good to have the best water professionals in the world with you. So I was like, well, worst case,
What do I got to lose,
I go,
right?
I go down and they save me.
Right, right. There's something to be said
So
about those guys out in Hawaii. I mean, having lived out on the Big Island, if you're going to go find a spot with some true watermen, Hawaii is the place to go. So it's interesting how, you going and building rescue boards in North Carolina, which also has some pretty good surf. Like you got the Outer Banks and whatnot, and some great boating and fishing. But Hawaii is really the epicenter for surfing and spearfishing and just living the waterman dream. So out of all the places, I mean, you seem to have a pretty good relationship with the guys out in Hawaii. I mean, I know you ship boards around the world, but Hawaii seems to be that one spot. What do you think really makes that connection for you? I know we had talked about the connection between North Carolina and Hawaii, which was very interesting. If you wouldn't mind touching on that, that'd be great.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
but what do you think makes a waterman, and why do you think Hawaii is that spot?
I can say from in the for the start of P2P, if you recall, when I started pro to paddle, I didn't know anything about building boards,
Right.
right? That's why I teamed up with somebody that did. Transfer that over to building damn large surfboards. I sure as hell didn't know what I was doing there,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I had my background in design and development, and we invested in all this fancy CAD technology to design boards, and then a CNC machine to make them,
Right.
right? And so I had all this technology at my disposal, and then I was like, well, if we're going to give this a go and we're going to learn how to build boards, let me team up with the best watermen, as you said, in the world
Yeah.
with the different conditions. And I was very, very fortunate that of two people, Kai
Mm-hmm.
on the North Shore, and then the chief of Kauai kind of took me under his wing, guy named Kalani Vieira.
Mm-hmm.
And they took a chance on me. Granted, nobody else was, listening to them and building specific custom boards what they need. And so
Right.
it was a really mutual, beneficial, and great relationship with the guys on the North Shore and then the guys on Kauai because
Mm-hmm.
I had spent, man, I was over there probably every 2 months, 3 months for about 2 years and
Mm.
spent a lot of time on the beach and in the water with these guys and listening to what they wanted. And they loved that, right?
Right.
But selfishly, I was getting the best education in the world.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, you can't ask for better input to learn how to do something. So I kind of thought to myself, well, if I can't build it right for these guys, then I don't deserve building them for anybody
Right.
because if I can't figure it out here, then it's not going to work anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And then that relationship continued to grow and grow. And yeah, it's a really interesting relationship between Hawaii and North Carolina in itself. And touching on what you asked is like part of me being from North Carolina when you go out to Hawaii, the Hawaiian culture outside of Waikiki,
Mm-hmm.
but the actual Hawaiian culture is a lot like the South.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're hardworking, they're polite, they use their manners, and you show respect.
Yep.
It's really that quite simple.
Mm-hmm.
Before my first trip to Hawaii, I called a friend of mine who had been way, way old school guy, like learned stand up paddle with
Cliff, you there? I can't hear you. I
looks
think.
like you
Oh,
froze on me.
yeah, I got you now.
Zach, did I lose you?
No, I got you. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
that's weird. Yeah, so yeah, yeah, I got you. So yeah, where I was going with that was he said, act like yourself,
Yeah.
act like you were raised in the South, act like you talk to your grandmother, act like you hold the door for a stranger coming out of the grocery store.
Right.
He said, be yourself and you'll be taken in, and that's what it was like. So that's why there's this really great connection, and North Carolinians have a long history of being lifeguards out there,
Mm.
and vice versa, and so having the North Carolina background, and people could hear my man, you'd be amazed, like on the North Shore or Maui, even people would hear it, my accent, and be like, "You're from Eastern North Carolina."
Right.
I'm like, "Holy crap!" I
Yeah.
am actually. So having that helped me get in with the Hawaiians, really good.
Yeah. It's interesting how, having lived on the Big Island and working on the water was such a connection for me to, the culture over there. And, it was funny that I was known as like the Northeast captain. And because, the Northeast has some pretty gnarly seas and it gets pretty rough and whatnot. And it was like this assumption that, oh, well, don't worry, Zach will go out that day. And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? I don't want I don't want to go out. but it was this mutual respect of, I wasn't just some haole guy from the mainland who just wanted to come over and make money and that was it. It was, I want to come over and and learn the culture and really kind of become enveloped by it. And it was kind of a duty that I put on myself that, I had to learn the culture and be a part of it because I was a representative and an ambassador for it, right? Because people from around the country would come and go on a charter with me. So it was a matter of, you know, I don't want to mess this up, right? Because I'm a representative of Hawaii, and that's kind of how I felt. What the way it was. So you, as a representative for, you know, rescuing people's lives and building boards, you got to ask, like, what goes into some of these boards. I know we just did a little bit of a shop tour, but you know, kind of walk us through. Obviously, there's board one, and you were telling me some of the boards have 7, 8, 9, 10 renditions to it, not to mention the sleds, and there's a huge process to building these things. So you having that that firsthand knowledge from those guys out in Hawaii, I mean, what kind of innovations were you trying to go from instead of just having a regular surfboard?
You also y'all. I'm going to answer your question, but you made me
Yeah.
think of something interesting. When I've been always trying to figure out, there's a guy here named Reggie Barnes who's Um, he's an old school guy here locally, but has a house in the Hawaiian Islands and
Mhm.
across islands. And he and I talk about that. What we were just talking about North Carolina, Hawaii. But you just said something that helped me. And he and I are always like, "How? I don't get it. Like I understand it, but I don't get why we get like along so well." And when you just said something that helped me realize that you being on the Big Island, you were there to like learn from the culture, learn
Mhm.
from your experiences on the water, and then give back to what you're trying to do out here on the East Coast as a
Right.
captain, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's interesting that that's actually what a reason that maybe I was taken in by so many people and not just pushed off as a Hallie because I wasn't coming to Hawaii just to take.
Right.
I'm not coming here just to. I want your experience. I want your knowledge. I want to take what you know and take it.
Right.
I was using it and then giving back.
Right.
So I think that might have a lot to do with, um, and that feeds right into your next question, into the design process, right?
Mhm.
You gotta you gotta be willing to listen and take what they tell you, come back to North Carolina, figure out what I wrote down on my napkin at lunch that he said about the fin placement,
Right.
and um, and then bring that back, apply it into an actual functional device,
Right.
and then send it back to Hawaii for testing,
Mhm.
right? And you know, there's there's so much trust in that relationship. They trust that I'm going to listen to them and bring it back and put it into a functional board,
Mhm.
and then I trust that they're going to take something that has no proven efficiency in the water, or even safe to be in the water, for God's sakes.
Right.
They trust that I've built something that's going to hopefully work,
Right.
and then trust that if it doesn't work, they're going to tell me, right?
Right.
So in terms of the innovation, it really just it was a relationship based on trust between the people giving the feedback and then applying it into the actual building of the board. It's the left brain, right brain. That's
Mhm.
I tell my wife a lot. It doesn't happen as much as it used to, but in the early days when we were doing a lot of these design changes,
Yep.
you literally have to go from like left brain all design,
Mhm.
like thinking about, okay, how you gotta I gotta put it into the actual CAD and then make it design and like that's the whole artsy side to the design, right?
Right.
But then you have to go switch over to your right brain and then apply that onto an actual machine,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And then apply that to building a hard board and the placement of the handles. And man, I can tell you, I'd come back. You asked another question, like where it started. We used to be down at the port in this crappy little roll up door warehouse, and I'd come back and I'd be exhausted. And we didn't have I didn't have any kids at that time. And she's like, "You all right?" I was like, "Man, like, I'm done. My brain is burnt. I
Yeah.
can't function."
Yep.
And I can remember thinking back, it's because you'd have to switch left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain,
Right.
and um, it would exhaust you. But then you wake up refreshed. The other crazy thing about that, Zach, when in that process, when we were doing a lot of that original design and like feedback and revision and left brain, right brain,
Right.
I would have the most gnarly, weird dreams,
No
just
way.
full of colors and sounds and tastes, and just not as if I was like tripping on acid or
Right.
mushrooms or something, but just the most clear and vivid dreams
Yeah.
during that time. It
Well,
was weird.
I can attest to that right there
Yeah.
because and some people don't believe me, but I will literally have moments where I wake up and I think I'm still on the boat, like out in the middle of the Pacific or towing because I do towing and salvage and whatnot, and or like I'm in the middle of a salvage and I just I'm waking up because I can't find something. I'll be standing up in the middle of my room and everyone's like, "What are you doing, man?" And my roommate out there in Hawaii, I would come home from charters and it would be like 1 a.m. in the morning. I got to be up at 7 and to go do another charter at 7:30. And I'd come home, I'd go to sleep, and he'd said, "Rollins, can you stop knocking on my door?" Because I'd go and I'd knock on his door thinking he was like a customer, and
Wow.
it was like it's so true because building this podcast and then you know working as a captain, that's so right brain, right? It's like I got to get a job done, very mission oriented. Then you go in from the left brain of like creativity and design work. I can totally agree with that. So, what were some of the like big, you know, momentous jumps, right? When you were talking to those guys and now you're trying to bring this knowledge back and implement it, right? And that's a big leap, and I'm sure there was some scary moments and some challenges, and where do I buy the foam, right? Where do I how do I use a CNC machine? And you going from real estate, it's like it's totally different. So what was it like when you first shipped off your first board, and then everything that was kind of like put into that board and be like, all right, here you go. I think it's gonna work, you know?
I threw up my first trip to Hawaii when I sent a board over there. I was so nervous. I got off the plane and I threw up getting off the plane when I landed in Oahu because I was so nervous about this board. This was probably after my second or third trip because the first and second trip back in 2016, we obviously didn't have any boards. We were, working on the design. So it wasn't
Right.
until 16 or 17 that we actually landed our first board. And of course,
Hmm.
I flew over there and I was so nervous the whole time. And that's when I got addicted to Zantac and antacids
Hmm.
because I would have to load up on that stuff. My wife would tell me like before going to a trip, like 2 weeks before I'm going to Hawaii during that time, she goes, "You need to start taking your Zantac now because it's 2 weeks out from when you're going to Hawaii." And it's nerves. It's
Uh-huh.
nerves. So you gotta you're not sure if like you said about finding the foam, you're not sure if the handle rubber that you sourced is going to be strong enough to hold up
Right.
because we're designing handle inserts that nobody's done before.
Hmm.
For example, we now use kite board foot strap inserts.
Interesting.
um, that was from going to that conversation a while ago. The professor is the one who gave me that idea. He's like, well, what about a kiteboard foot strap that works with epoxy?
Right.
And oh great. So you don't know if that's going to hold up.
Hmm.
So you're not just worried about whether or not the board works. You're worried about, damn, is a handle going to break and just a small 8-foot swell,
Right.
on the South Shore or East Side or something. So
Hmm.
you're worried about a lot. I can't say even after building the 300 boards that I'm any less worried because stuff can still go wrong. Um,
Right.
and it can, and maybe someday let's hope pray to God it doesn't, but stuff happens, and you got to trust that as long as I say to my kids now, well, my daughter, she's 5, and I say it to her now. I was like, all you can do is the best that you can do at the time that you're at,
Right.
and that's if you truly believe that that's you're giving it all you've got
Hmm.
and the best you can do right now, whether you're doing your school tests or
Hmm.
studying or designing boards, you can't be upset at yourself. There's going to be um, things happen, but as long as you give it everything you can, that's how I put my trust in these boards and these guys putting them in the water. And now, obviously, I'm not losing as much sleep with version 7
Sure.
that you saw sitting on the Rex going to San Diego. Um, but then we throw ourselves into the rescue sleds, and
Right.
we just built a new model called the Responder that just shipped out to Tahiti, and it's going to
Wow.
get
That's
it's
really
going
cool.
to yeah, it's going to Raimana at Teapu at Chopes, and we finished it. And it's this new design. It's like a larger rescue sled that's not as wide, so you can fit multiple people on it
Hmm.
and make uh, quicker grabs from the big wave surfers there in the big waves.
Yep.
And we built it. It was only like the second one I built, and I was like, "Crap, we got it! I have to test this thing." It was like I boxed it up, and then Sunday I looked at my wife and I was like, "Damn, Holly," I was like, "I haven't tested that thing yet. I can't
Mm.
send that thing to Tahiti without throwing it in the water." So we unboxed the damn thing, threw it behind the boat, got a half a dozen lifeguards from our local ocean rescue. And I was like, "All right, let's go try and break this thing," and
Love it.
yeah, and so these guys, you know, these guys are great. They love just to try and break stuff with me
Just beating on it.
and try
Yeah.
to see just beat on it, get it in the water. How many people can we fit on this thing until it breaks off the back of the jet ski? You know,
Yeah.
um, and it held up great. And so then I'm not worried about it
Right.
going to Tahiti now because we did our best and we designed what we could.
Right.
Um,
I'm
So,
sure you've had
yeah,
quite a few stories of, your equipment getting used for rescues. I mean, you're putting yourself out there in some of the gnarliest, roughest, and worst conditions, on the planet. I mean, big wave surfing is no joke. I had a conversation with Terry Sims, who wasn't a he wasn't a big wave surfer, just because his era that wasn't the big thing. But he works with a lot of guys like Pat McNamara and some other big wave
sure,
surfers. Um, and he was just describing me the amount of force that's coming down, and he developed a helmet for surfers. So, in the same sense, you guys are kind of in the same space. Both creating safety equipment for the surf industry and lifeguarding industry. What are some of the stories that you've gotten back, if you can share any? I mean, I don't know
sure.
what that's like, but
I think one of my favorite stories, and it was early on building rescue boards, and I'm not sure if I'd even committed to P2P yet at that time fully in my brain. I might
mhm,
have in my time quitting real estate, but maybe not in my brain. Um, I built this. I look at it this days. I can't believe this. I did build this board, but we call it one of the East Coast models.
mhm,
On the East Coast here versus West Coast and Hawaii, we got smaller, swell,
right,
mushier type waves, right?
mhm,
But yet our currents can be just as bad, if not worse, than anywhere,
sure,
in my opinion, because our sand moves. We have a sandier bottom than the West Coast, and quite frankly, Hawaii, because they have the
the love rock,
coral.
yeah,
Yep, yep. And then West Coast has a lot of rock,
mhm,
not so much sands in some places. So our bottoms change more. So I think we have worse rips than about anywhere. Well, so I designed this board, these huge hips, like it had like 4 inches thick at the back and like two at the front. The idea was that the board in my brain at the time was that it's got a bigger bottom so that it was going to push through the mush
mhm,
better, right, with a lot
mhm,
of weight.
yeah,
And it's a people love the board. It's a great board. But the story behind that was I didn't know if that damn thing was going to work.
mhm,
And I've been fortunate along this path that I've had a couple of captains and chiefs and big agencies go in with me on this journey and try and build something,
mhm,
right? See if it works. And this one was down in Palm Beach County. And I hadn't heard anything about the East Coast model, and then this kid came up to me at a U.S. lifesaving event. He was standing to the side. I was talking to somebody. He was standing to the side for like 30 minutes, and then he wanted to talk to me when nobody was around. He's like, "You're Cliff," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He's like, "I got to tell you a story real fast. I'm a lifeguard, part-time lifeguard. I'm not like one of these career guys. I like to
mhm,
be around it." He said, "But I took your East Coast model." He said, "I was standing in the stand at a pier. I want to say it was Was it Pompano maybe or
mhm,
Juneau Pier, and there was four females out that had gotten sucked out of a rip right along the pier,
mhm,
and." He said the only thing he could do is grab the board and go out. And he remembers like paddling out, not thinking, he's like, how the hell am I going to rescue four people out in this rip? And there was actually some big surf.
mm,
And he, long story short, he said he was able to get everybody on that board. And as he was paddling in, a wave came around their back. He thought it was going to pearl and everybody was going to fly off the board. He said because the back had so much beef on it, it
right,
pushed right in, and the board went right up on the beach, and everybody was fine. He said
wow,
without incident. He said, I know for a fact. He said, I would not have been able to save everybody if we wouldn't have been able to get everybody on that board when I got out there the first time.
yeah. I just got goosebumps.
And
Yeah,
I know,
that's wild.
right?
Yeah,
It is wild. And I even get a little emotional talking about it because it's like, God dang, it's like it was one circumstance that could have had a totally different outcome because
right,
people die in rip currents all the time, right?
mhm,
So I actually tried to, when I did that TED talk you brought up, I
yeah.
tried to find that guy, and he didn't want to talk about that story
Oh,
again,
really?
which is fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think because it was probably an emotional thing for him.
yeah,
I called the chief and I was like, "Hey, can you put me?" Because I didn't get the guy's name,
right,
and I got the guy, and he's like, "Oh, I'm good, man. Thanks, but no, no."
yeah,
That was and I get it because it's emotional things.
sure.
They don't. He didn't want to talk about it, which is fine. But I guess I just told the story here, but
Now it's live.
I mean, yeah, now it's like he'll be fine.
Yeah,
But it's important, and so yeah, that's when I thought, okay, so these this actually idea that
Mhm.
a different board for each coast makes sense, and that was kind of one of those pivotal moments where we realized that what we're designing for different breaks is can function.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
whether or not we can make it into a business that can survive and advance hurricanes, pandemics,
Yeah, you
is another
guys
thing. But
right.
we're making a difference, and so
And that's the important part. I think it'll all, it all comes back around, right? I mean, it's what you put out there that, eventually and hopefully will come back to you. Now, you work with a lot of municipalities like fire departments, obviously with lifeguards, police departments, other rescue entities. What is kind of that process when you guys are looking at building a board? Because like you said, every board is different and every sled that you're building is different. And even from a captain's perspective, knowing that, one boat is not going to perform like the other boat. Like yesterday I was delivering a 42-foot Sabre, which, has kind of a round bottom hull, but it's a little bit deeper V, nice keel on it. And, it does great in like a small chop, but in a bigger sea, I probably wouldn't want to take it out, versus like a big heavy lobster boat with, a lot of weight in the stern. I'd feel much more comfortable taking that out into something that's a little bit gnarlier, right? So when you're
right.
working with these municipalities, what's the conversation you look like when you're like, all right, well, what's your victim and who are you trying to, cater to and what kind of conditions and so on and so forth? There's got to be some sort of recipe, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't know the recipe to begin with, right? Because
Right.
nobody was really doing what we were doing. So then I was down. I used to throw different models. I remember 17-foot enclosed trailer, and I had cut foam, and I had like 7 different models
Hmm.
of rescue boards, a 10-foot, a couple versions of 11-foot, and driving up and down the East Coast, just getting anybody I could find to put in the water, right?
Right.
And I had to go do some cold knocks on like agencies up north in Florida. And finally, I think it was down in Jacksonville, Florida, and I got the captain
Mhm.
who was on duty, and he did not want to talk to me. He standard. I'm
Right.
the vendor trying to sell him something out of my trailer.
Yeah.
Like I get it, yeah, right. And he said, "Go talk." We'll say John. He'll say, "Go talk to John in Tower 7. He's the board guy."
Mhm.
He goes, "Whatever he says, I'll listen." And I was like, "Oh man, wait a minute. There's a board guy. Every agency has the one guy, the go-to guy, who knows about boards,
Okay.
right?" So there's the recipe. It's that simple. So then I realized, okay, forget the captain and the chief. Let me go through somebody I know somehow that knows somebody who's the board guy for Jacksonville, Florida, or for Santa Cruz,
Right.
or for San Clemente, right?
Mhm.
Find the board guy. Because if you can get to the board guy, then he's going to want to talk to you. He's a geek like me
Right.
and just wants to talk about board design all day long till we fall asleep,
Yeah.
right? So then if you can get him, then you can get the knowledge you need to know what to build. What's
Mhm.
the coast like? What's your victim like? Right. And then you work with him, you build his trust. And then when he goes talks to the captain, the chief,
Mhm.
they listen.
Right.
Because the captain chief, they don't want to listen to me. Now they do now because I have awesome relationships with these people,
Right.
right? But early on, I was doing something nobody else was doing, and they don't want to exhaust their time
Mhm.
with building something new.
Right.
So the recipe is actually quite that simple. Find the board guy. The board guy from the North Shore was Kai,
Yep.
right? The board guy for Kauai was Kalani. The board guy in San Diego was a guy named Richard Strobel. The board
Mhm.
guy, I can rain off my head right now different agencies all over the country who's the board guy.
Right.
You know,
In your contacts
uh,
in your phone, do you have board guy under their names?
it's tough. I have like Sam lifeguard, but then early on, I wasn't like I should have put Sam lifeguard LA County.
Right.
So now I'm like I type in
Thousands of
lifeguard, and it has like
lifeguards.
40. I'm like, God, crap! I'm not gonna be able to find this guy now.
Right. Right. Right.
So yeah,
But now
that's
you bring up
funny,
a
but not funny because it's hard to get.
right. Now it's hard to get in touch with people.
Yeah,
You bring up a good point though, like finding the board guy, but also building trust. And I feel like in a world that's in the outdoors and on the water, and pretty much in any industry, right? It's all about building and forging relationships, and then building that trust with someone. And in an industry in a business where you're literally saving lives, that is of the utmost importance. So why do you think that is? Other than the fact that you're saving someone's life, but why do you think being around the ocean, being around the outdoors, trust is so, pivotal in creating a great relationship?
The ocean, the ocean is probably the most unpredictable. You being a boat captain know this, right?
Mhm.
The ocean is the most unpredictable environment, quite frankly, probably in the world that you can put yourself in,
Mhm.
right? Um, if you do your research, then you know more. But and I've learned this from the Hawaiians. You have to show that respect to the ocean. If you don't show the ocean respect, it will clobber you.
Mhm.
Um, so you have to, and so if you're going to put yourself in an unpredictable environment that you're not certain what's going to happen, whether
Mhm.
you're going in for a rescue or going for a surf, right?
Right.
You have to trust the people around you.
Mhm.
You can't if you're in can we cuss here? I don't know.
Go
If
for
you're
it.
in the shit, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're in out to make a rescue, even that kid that I just told that story about at the end of the Juneau Pier,
Yeah.
he was in the shit out there. He was only 30 yards from shore, but he was in it to make a save. And so
Yep.
if you don't trust the equipment you're on, or if you don't trust the people that are out there with you, um, then you're not going to survive. You're not going to survive. You're not going to be able to make the rescue.
Right.
So unless you can find that way to build that trust with the equipment you're on, or find the trust for your fellow lifeguard or
Mhm.
fellow first responder, then when you're really in the heat, if you can't trust that person in an unpredictable environment or trust that piece of equipment in a circumstance that could change in the blink of an eye, then you really don't stand a chance of surviving or making a difference.
Right.
Um, I actually learned part of that story from Brian Keelana.
Okay.
Yeah, we were doing some training on the North Shore, and he told me a story or he was telling a crowd a story of how now with everybody has Apple Watches,
Mhm.
right? He's like, back in the day, man, he goes, we had to rely on each other out at Waimea. He said, but
Right.
now the great thing is he goes, you need to know your environment. And he talks about, an unpredictable environment. If you got to know where you are
Mhm.
and then trust people you're with, even if they're strangers. So he says now when he paddles out at Waimea or somewhere with big surf, there's more people out there. He immediately asks, okay, who has an Apple Watch with cell service?
Hmm.
Because when the shit does go down, that person's now where, hey, I'm the only person that can actually call somebody from my phone on
Right.
my watch and get help,
Right.
right? And so then Brian knows who has that watch.
Yep.
So if something does go down, there's an immediate trust that, okay, that's the dude that's going to call 911,
Right.
right? So then you're putting trust in strangers,
Yeah.
but you're all in the same environment, and you got to trust people around you.
Yeah. And also your equipment. I mean, I've been
And
told,
the equipment, yeah,
and you being the equipment builder, you really are as good as your gear. If you're
yeah,
carrying around a crappy knife and you get a line caught around your leg and it gets sucked in the prop, like, you know, you got a problem, right? If the
right,
board, handle, breaks or the fin snaps or what have you, you got a big problem. So it's really, trusting your equipment and, trusting people around you. But did you, through this whole process, there obviously the guys out in Hawaii and the municipalities that you work with, you got to trust them and they trust you. Is there anyone, personally to you that you've trusted and that have kind of, helped you out along the way? Because, P2P, it as much as it is built by you, Cliff, you know, there's got to be that one or two people or that team of people that's like, all right, don't worry, like we can still, we can get through this. Like, you threw up getting off the plane, but you had to have called someone and be like, all right, I can get through this, like no worries, and they kind of help you out through that. Is there anyone like that for you?
I could put it in two little bubbles, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first bubble of those people I trust, I mentioned earlier, the two people that the chief of Kauai,
Right.
Kalani Vieira, who is also the world tandem surfing champion. He's an awesome guy. And then Kai and a handful of lifeguards on the North Shore,
Yeah.
right? So I put that in trust into that's those people that really pick me up and help me learn.
Right.
So then there's the other side of the equation. That's the left side of the brain going back to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the right side. There's been people um, that have worked with me
Mhm.
who trust in my crazy ideas sometimes, not to necessarily they know when to say that's a stupid idea or all right, let's try it.
Right.
And I've had one person who's worked with me as my right hand for about 3 years. Um, and interesting enough, she doesn't come from a surfing background or a water background, which was
Hmm.
awesome because she could look at what we're doing from a completely objective perspective.
Right.
Like like and she's the one who made our handles and helped us figure out how to make a rubber handle, wrap it in duct tape so that it would slide through the webbing so that we could hotwire, or
Right.
put it in the board, right?
Yeah.
So those people. And she just recently left me to move to the mountains to start her family, which she always told me she would. And but it was also she knew, and we talked about this. Our a lot of our hard innovation designs that we had to come up with, we've passed, like
Mhm.
the handles and some of the more about. So it was interesting. It was time for her to move on, and she knew it. She's like, we've done a lot of great things, but time for my next thing, and I was so happy for her. And
Right.
um, so people like that who
Mhm.
have trusted, just hey, let's get our hands dirty and let's figure out how to do this. Let's
Right.
figure out how to make this handle better. Let's figure out how to build a plastic nose cone on the
Mhm.
sled that we just built. So there's been like a whole lot of handful of people on that in that bubble, not anyone specific, but a whole lot of people when I'd run into a problem,
Mhm.
or not necessarily a problem, but let's just say something I got to figure out that hasn't been done before.
Right.
Professor, I've talked about the professor, right,
Yeah.
from the
Chemical
university,
guy.
the chemist.
Yeah.
When I have a problem, I go talk to him. So in that other bubble, there's been a handful of people that I've gone to because one thing I learned in real estate building buildings, if you don't know what you're talking about, go talk to somebody that does. You're
Right.
not an engineer.
Mhm.
Don't try and design the struts for an awning that's going to have 50 people eating lunch under because it's going to fall and kill everybody,
Right.
right?
Right.
So go to the person that knows what they're talking about. And
Yeah.
so I carry that over in this. If I don't know what I'm talking about, I can't pretend it or fake it because then I'm putting somebody else's life on the line
Right.
in the real world. So let's go to somebody that does.
Mhm.
Um, so that was kind of the two bubbles of people that have helped a lot of this along the way.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. Like if I have a question, I've been fortunate to have a good network of people that I can go to, whether it's a mechanical problem on the boat that I need help like right now and it's, 1 a.m. I need to talk to someone, or, just figuring out the setup for a podcast, right? Like good audio and video and stuff like that. And, everything else that I've worked on, it's like it comes down to the team of people that you have and knowing that you're not going to be good at everything, but there's going to be some people that are really good at that one thing. And why wouldn't I go and talk to that person? Right. And I think that's super important, is like picking your team and sticking with them and, being trustworthy and reliable. But then also going back to what we talked about earlier is like, learning as much as you can, but also giving back even more. Right. It's, you always want to give more than you always want to, give back more than you take.
Yeah. The hardest part about that process, what you just talked about, and like, even though you go to somebody that knows what they're talking about, and you got to pick the audio, right?
Yep.
And somebody says, "Oh, this is a good one," and then you got to trust it's going to work right now as we're talking, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, and so that's all on you. You might have gone and talked to the right person, and they might have
Right.
given you the right idea. Hey, man, but that's all on you right now
Yeah.
to
Of
make sure
course.
we're getting it. And that's the same thing in this process of designing some of this stuff. Like, I can go talk to the professor. I can talk to somebody in Hawaii. I can talk to my person here that helps me build stuff,
Yeah.
whoever that is at the time. But when it's on me, man. When it goes out that door and goes
Yeah.
into the scenario, it's on you.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where the anxiety comes from. But
Right.
it goes away over time. The better you get at it. But
Right.
yeah, at the end of the day, that's probably the loneliest part of what I do,
Hmm.
of building boards, is that you have to be willing to put all that on your shoulders. You can't blame anybody else,
Right.
and that's scary, dude. I mean, and over time I've gotten better at it because I have a whole lot of people that trust me and I trust them to give me their feedback. But
Yep.
during that time of, I mean, I'm in it a little bit right now with that board going to Tahiti.
Right.
It's gonna go, it's God, that thing's going to be behind one of the best watermen in the world, most likely, and probably grabbing one of the biggest wave, most famous surfers in the world off of that wave. And it's going to be on my sled. And if that damn thing
Yeah.
goes, something
Goes to
goes
shit.
wrong,
Yeah. Yeah.
bro, that's on me,
Right.
and that is all on me. And so and I know that's going to happen. I mean, I know that there's I don't want to say names, but I mean, I know that the best surfers in the world will be on that thing right behind him,
Sure.
and that's all I can do is throw a bunch of lifeguards here and try and break it. So
Yeah.
at least it'll work something. So
Right. And then
yeah, it's a lot of nervousness.
yeah, and it's just a matter of like, all right, you just got to pull the trigger, right? And that weird feeling of, I hope it's gonna work. But I think deep down inside, you always have that faith of it's gonna work. For
Yeah,
some
yeah.
weird reason, right? It'll all pan out, and what's the worst that could happen? Obviously, the worst that could happen in your industry is a little bit higher stake, but knowing you and knowing everything that's gone on the board and all the people behind that board, it's what's going to happen. Know it's going
I'll
to
give
work
you a good
out.
example of that. It, right now, Nazare is going off
Hmm.
in Portugal.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's guys from here actually riding some of the largest waves ever ridden.
Hmm.
And I showed you earlier our new fifth generation soft top sled.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We finished that. I mean, we finished the design the fifth model probably a year ago, and we just got our first load of them, and we've been testing them.
Hmm.
And there was guys that were calling that in Portugal that knowing this was coming, they wanted one,
Right.
and they want to put it out there. And even though it's our fifth generation, I said no. It'd be amazing marketing. It would probably sell heaps of them just from it being used out there right now.
Right.
But I wasn't. And I have a lot of people pinging me right now saying, "Hey, I'm looking at these videos. Is that yours in there? Is that yours?" And I think there actually one is over. Somebody must have grabbed one because there is one floating around over there.
Yeah.
But uh, I told a couple people no, I don't want to be over there just yet. I'm not ready for it to be into that because
Right.
that's a different thing. So and that takes a lot. I'm still trying to grow a business and make a profit eventually. And if I can't market the stuff, then how are we going to sell them? So
Right.
it takes a lot of, yeah, you want to say faith that you're making the right decision, but it's more so you're making the right decision because it's not proven yet.
Right.
It's been used for 3 years, but still not ready for that.
Hmm.
Um, now, seeing what is over there and now having it tested for another 3 months, I'm the other side was like, damn it, that thing definitely would have been able to.
Right.
I totally should have sent.
Right.
But like I said earlier, I made that decision a couple months ago, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah.
But
For sure.
it's funny.
Well, Cliff,
So,
it's been great talking to you about, P2P, your how you kind of got into it and all the trials and tribulations, the challenges and whatnot. Where can people get to know you and P2P Rescue a little bit more? How can they find you?
the best way, and probably the only reason we've been able to build P2P Rescue is social media.
Yeah.
Um, without the advent of social media, we would not have been able to progress so fast with reaching people and places,
Right.
and people reaching us easily. So the easiest way is social media, Instagram, particularly
Hmm.
at P2P Rescue. You can usually get me. I don't have a fancy social media
That's how I found you.
director. That's how you found me.
Yeah.
And then our website, www.p2prescue.com.
Awesome.
We just did an awesome update to it and a lot of cool stuff coming.
Yeah, looks great. Well, it was a real pleasure being, able to have you on the show, and I'm just look forward to talking to you more, and yeah, it's been great.
Thanks, Zach. It's I've enjoyed this discussion and had my own realizations of I don't get to step back and look at the history and a few things I've learned today as well. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. Real pleasure. Thanks, Cliff.
All right, brother. Be good.